through these 4 types of intuition, it manifests an inconceivable number of ways. The trick really is to understand what intuition feels like for you. And when I work with people, I do a series of baseline exercises to teach people what their intuition feels like. Because intuition can be a male's voice, it can be a female's voice, it can be a feeling in your heart, it can be an inspiration, it can be a vision. You could see spirits, you could see energy. All of these are different ways that intuition works. Or it can be something as simple as you want to make something and you have an idea for a design. So it's very grounded in one level, but it's also very ethereal on another level, and it's the full spectrum in between.
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, the best place to shop for unique clothing, spiritual handcrafted jewelry, healing gemstones, and fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now, here's your host, Brett Larkin.
Hello, Savannah family. Welcome back to the show. Today, we are talking all things intuition, one of my favorite topics. And we're also changing up the format just a little bit. So we're going to go back to having the podcast be twice a week instead of just once a week. I have some really exciting things in store, some amazing guests. So you're going to be hearing from our guest this week, Kim Chestney, both today and on Thursday. There'll be a second episode with her. And going forward, you're going to want to tune in on Tuesdays and Thursdays. It will be the same guest, sometimes a part 1 and part 2, sometimes us just diving into a different topic. And I've also started a cool lightning round with the cool guests we have on the show, asking them topics and questions that I think you are the most interested in a quick, snappy format. I think you're gonna love it. In today's episode with Kim, we're going to learn about the 4 different types of intuition that each of us possess. We're going to discover how to use Kim's process of elimination, I love this, to uncover what is just your thoughts versus your true intuitive voice. We're going to find out why awakening your intuition is a 2-step process that involves both receiving information but also taking action. Kim's going to also be talking to us about how accessing our intuition is about flow and how we can stage an intuition intervention when we're making small or big decisions. So get ready to be inspired. If you get inspired by the theme of this week's episodes and you're looking to enhance your intuition a little more, check out Savannah Spirit's Lapis Lazuli Crystal Collection. It's known to help improve your intuitive abilities. Lapis Lazuli is a powerful gemstone worn by the ancient Egyptians for various enhancing qualities. And SavannahSpirit.com has a beautiful jewelry collection and crystals that you can put around your home or wear or carry with you on the go. Use that discount code podcast30 for 30% off your first order. Now introducing our guest, Kim Chestney. She's a best-selling holistic author, artist, and the founding director of Pittsburgh Create Festival. Her book, The Psychic Workshop, a complete program to fulfilling your spiritual potential, has been published around the world since 2004. She's known for her unique perspective on holistic intuition for body, mind, heart, and spirit, and is known for revolutionizing our understanding of inner guidance. So Kim, thank you so much for being on the show. And before we actually started recording, we were chit-chatting and you mentioned something to me about the 4 types, the 4 different kinds of intuition. And I thought, wow, that's a perfect juicy place to start. So what are those 4 types?
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about intuition in terms of body, mind, heart, and spirit. Really, it corresponds to the Jungian cognitive functions. Earth, air, water, and fire. We see this repetitive theme over and over again, and it truly applies to intuition. But before we go into a deep dive about each of these things, I want to mention that, really the way this works is that intuition is kind of the source of all these things. All of these things go back to intuition as our connection with our divine source. So I think I'm going to just go on and on and on about intuition today because I get up on my soapbox about this, because I think it's so under recognized as such a valuable part of all aspects of our life. It's not just for spiritual work. It's for creative work. It's for business. It's for parenting. It's for everything we do every day. And really understanding that intuition has this crucial role in our life is really paramount to our spiritual development and to our success and our happiness and all the things that come with it.
And I'm so excited to hear about these 4 types, but I agree with you. Maybe it would be great if you shared with listeners just what is your personal definition of intuition at this point in your evolution?
Absolutely. That is a great question. So for me, I go back to what Paramahansa Yogananda said very simply, a huge advocate of intuition, that intuition is our soul's connection to God. So whatever word you use for our source, God, the divine, spirit, intuition is our connection to that. It's our direct line, right? So we can think about things all we want and try and solve problems. That's not going to get us something. When our intuition works, it's in an instant. It's instantaneous because we have that direct connection. So the whole purpose of intuition work is learning to strengthen that connection so that you're right there, so it comes right through and you don't have the interference of the mind or the distractions of the world to create these blockages that prevent us from living our truth, right? So when we are in our intuition and we're connected, we naturally live our truth and we're authentic. So that's how we know that we can really gauge our spiritual progress, is this level of authenticity we have in our lives when our inner world and our outer world are expressed as one.
And you said something interesting before, which is that even business people and executives can benefit by honing and refining their intuition. Can you talk more about intuition and how it applies to people who maybe even aren't so interested in the spiritual side of things?
Absolutely. I come from the technology world. I've worked in tech for 20 years, and I hear the word intuition as much in that world as I do in my spiritual work. It is hugely important right now. When we're talking about, we live in the culture of data and technology and all of these things that, work with our mind, and we're consumed by so much information. What the real holy grail is now is become intuition, because, all of this stuff gets lost in the fray. But when we can use our intuition to solve these problems and to create a design that's more functional, all these different ways we can use intuition gives us a leg up, right? The best companies, Apple's the best example of that. Everyone uses that example, but you see them as this company that really embraced intuition. Steve Jobs was a big supporter of intuition, as opposed to, the traditional linear methods of working with things. And they've created these really intuitive products that were better and that people loved just because they were able to have that creative, intuitive element with it. So there's tons of ways. It really is tied in with creativity. And that's one of the types that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But tapping into this aspect of our work in business is important when you're talking about innovation and doing new things and creating things that no one's done before, because that is all the realm of intuition.
I jumped when you said that word linear, because I think very often we hear about intuition as corresponding to the right side of the brain, right? That more creative side. Do you agree with that? Like that intuition corresponds to a certain area or segment of our mind?
I'm still trying to figure that one out, because there's a lot of talk with like the limbic system, and that there's definitely these two sides. But in my mind, truly, intuition is beyond both of these opposites and these sort of manifested dualities. For me, the way I connect with my intuition, in the sense I have my intuition, is really beyond all of that. So while our feelings and are on one side and our thoughts are on the other, truly the intuition is the source above both of them, if that makes any sense.
No, I love that. And that invokes a great visual too. And for our theme today, which is about how to live your truth by awakening your intuition, I think people have so many questions about that. They feel like they're not naturally intuitive. Maybe this is where you talking about the 4 types is good, because before we talk about how to awaken it, it might give listeners ideas to hear the different types.
Absolutely. This is perfect. So everyone has intuition. We'll start with that. And what I think is really interesting, by the way, I'm a big fan of your podcast, and I've listened to them regularly. And I noticed time and time again, I think probably in just about every single one, someone talks about intuition. And not all the podcasts are even themed around intuition. You see that intuition is like this ubiquitous force that kind of penetrates all of the different elements of the spiritual work that we're doing. So when you look at the different ways that intuition can manifest itself, it boils down to these 4 general types. So quick overview. Think of it in terms of simplified body, mind, heart, and spirit, right? We're all familiar with that concept of the human spiritual anatomy. So we have our physical bodies, we have our minds and our thoughts and our intellect. We have our emotive body, our feeling body in terms of being moved. And then we have our spiritual, blissful, eternal self. And intuition flows from each of those functions through us, depending on our affinity. Like some people are more inclined to certain types of intuition than others. You know, an artist will definitely channel intuition differently than someone who is an accountant, right? And we all have it and it works through us, but everybody works with it in a unique way. And that's one of the reasons why intuition is so misunderstood. I mean, for something that is, I would consider literally the most important thing in the world, we know so little about it. Like, people do not understand it. It's mysterious. It's a concept that people have so many misconceptions about. You know, we confuse it with other things. And to truly understand what it is, we have to look at those misconceptions and put them aside and focus on these 4 types and how it actually translates into human experience. So the first type is what I call physical intuition. And that's the kind of intuition that you feel with your body or that you experience through your senses. So if you are, if you are someone who you do yoga, you do Qigong, you do Reiki, all of this energy work, very much focused on physical intuition. You're channeling that intuitive energy through your physical body and you're using it.
Kim, is that physical intuition also maybe that feeling we get, like if something is going to go wrong or we suddenly feel uncomfortable or unsafe for some reason, or is that something different?
No, that is definitely correct. Like if you're sitting and you feel like you're getting like chills in your spine, or you have a feeling in your gut, like a nervousness or any kind of physical sensation, that's all tied into physical intuition, right? So the what I call the meta senses is kind of how the purview that is under, which is basically the 5 senses only on the spiritual side. So you have what people call like clairvoyance and clairaudience, right? I just call them the meta senses because to me that makes sense. It's like if you have a vision or you hear a sound that's not there, or you feel something on your body or have a physical experience for no reason at all. All of these things are just tied into experiences of the body and sensations of the body as an alert system, as a communication system of our intuition to let us know. Food cravings is another way that our intuition works with us. We crave food often because our body needs nutrients, right? So if there's any means of getting us intuitive information through our physical body is physical intuition.
Yeah, because when you were talking about this earlier, it was reminding me of when I had psychic teachers on the show and they talked about the clairs, the different clairs and clairvoyance. So it's all of that. Anything physical input is under this broad category of physical intuition, body intuition.
Yep. And it also could be called the sixth sense, right? They kind of talk about the sixth sense. That is your physical body intuition.
I think I have a pretty good grasp of that one. Share with me and the listeners the next one. I think you said it was mind intuition?
Yeah, right. So I call that practical intuition because it really helps with decision making, and we use it every day. Like that's the kind of thing that you know, when you're driving to work and you're like, oh, should I go this way or should I go that way? Which way is the traffic? Or should I wear this? Or should I do that? Or should I take this job? Or should I, go out with this person? All of these things, when you're processing information, this is the practical intuition at work, right? So think of it all in terms of pretty much of decision making. For example, you're trying to take a new job and you're like, oh, you're weighing the pros and the cons and this and that. At the end of the day, you just need to stop, relax, and let your intuition, which one feels right with my intuition, right? That'll get us to the answer much quicker than trying to toil through all of the problems to solve it, right? So that's a pretty straightforward one.
Got it. All right. And then next we have heart intuition.
Yep. And that I call creative intuition, because I like to distinguish that because it's very tricky with the heart intuition, because you get into levels of feeling that are really related to physical intuition, like emotional responses, things like that. But this kind of creative intuition is emotive. So this is where we get into the realm of creativity and business and innovation and ingenuity and all of the different things that move us to be inspired to do things and create things and build things and transform things. So we've entered into a new place, right? You can see the progression of we're coming from the physical, we're moving up to just, first we're in a body in a very specific place, then we're moving to a decision-making process, and now we're moving into motion, right? So we've gone from stillness all the way, we're moving into motion, and now we're starting to transform. So anything transformative falls under creative intuition. You're inspired to make something or build something or start a company or build a new product or, design something in a way it's never been designed before. All of these things are creative intuition at work. And it's a huge force right now in our economy and in our culture. There's so much happening around this creative intuition. And it's a really crucial time now as we balance out all of the stuff from the information age.
So this creative intuition sort of like that feeling of a percolating idea a little bit?
Absolutely, right? Anything you're inspired to do or moved to do, right? It can be, it doesn't even have to be an idea. I think sometimes like falling in love is a little bit of a creative intuition because it moves us to go to transform ourselves and to grow through another human being and to possibly create children and a whole new life, right? So there's different interpretations of this energy as it really, at the core of this creative intuition is the transformation of ourselves into something better as our souls evolve. So it's really tied into our evolution.
All right. And then what is our last one? You said spirit.
That's really like the end game, right? But the spiritual intuition is when we reach that point or we're in that space where we truly connect with our higher self, the universe, God, spirit, when we feel that bliss and cosmic oneness and connection with that place within ourselves that is the eternal. So, we can reach this through meditation and through our spiritual growth and coming to a place in our spiritual development where we have trust and acceptance in life and living this path of spiritual enlightenment. And the more that we grow in that path, the closer and more accessible this spiritual intuition becomes. And then along with that, we start to, you hear the stories of the yogis that have the psychic powers and the magical abilities because they're so tied in and at one and connected with this transcendent and internal force.
It's really interesting what you're saying because for me, and I'm sure for many listeners, we use our meditation practice, and I don't know, maybe you use your meditation practice in this way, but as this way to connect with universal intelligence or to, from the ideas of Tantra, like kind of taking a download from Brahman, like this universal intelligence when we meditate and bringing that back down into our life. That seems like what you're talking about when you're talking about this sort of spiritual intuition. Is that true?
Absolutely. And in all of these states that you reach through your yoga practice and all the different types of yoga are very much tied in with accessing that source through your intuition, right? Even the things that you're doing, like the intuition is working through you in those moments. And the feeling you have, like when you have that sort of high sometimes, it's that joy and that bliss that you connect with through that process of bringing that down to earth in your spiritual practice.
How would you best suggest our listeners visualize intuition in their life? Because I love when you opened, you talked about it. I was sort of visualizing it as this, glittery stuff above our head, right? Like it's not in the right brain specifically or anything like that. It's sort of above. But listening to you talk about these 4 different types, it kind of seems like it's all over the place. Like it's in our body and it's in our mind. And when you were talking about the creative intuition, I was thinking about like the second chakra and the pelvis area and kind of what's the best place do you think for us to visualize where intuition resides?
That is a fascinating question. The first thing that comes to my mind is light, right? Like, so when I do my meditations and I work with my intuition and I do some intuition empowerment meditations, I equate my intuition with light. So whether the light is bathing our third eye or energizing our third eye or our entire like sort of chakra system, because it works through all the chakras. But I do think there's this feeling with the third eye, when your intuition's working, we often feel it in our third eye. You can feel the energy working there. So there is some sort of connection on a physical level at that point, right? But ultimately, I think intuition travels on the light of love, right? So this divine light that we sense in our spiritual experiences, the light of God, the light of the universe, that's what intuition travels on. And we know that light carries energy and information, right? So I think it's all connected and it's a natural pathway. So when I do my activation meditations, I really suggest using light as a source of direction and intention for your intuition pathways.
That is a great tip. So for people who are trying to awaken their intuition, they want to get more in touch with their intuition, what are these activation techniques or activation meditations that you do and you suggest to others?
As we work with people as they develop their intuition and start to activate it and awaken it, one of the techniques that we use is series of different meditations that allow people to open that flow, right? So the whole idea is opening this flow is to get your mind quiet and get it into a state where you can receive. So this is very important. So in order to get to this place, we have to quiet the mind, which is, we talk a lot about stillness and mindfulness. Obviously, the work of Eckhart Tolle and is really crucial in us learning to quiet and create that space in our mind to allow other things to come through. So, once we embrace this practice of stillness, it opens up our minds for these channels to receive the information that we need to carry this information to ourselves and then out into the world. And that's the real tricky thing with intuition that most people don't understand is it's not just a process of receiving. We do want to receive the intuition. We want to get the information. But then not only do we have to understand what the information we're getting, but then we have to actualize it. And that's what the part that people don't really grasp. That's where the really exciting part comes in, right? It's a two-step process. You receive it, you become aware of it, right? You have to open your mind and quiet your mind so that you can become aware of this voice within you that's telling you and calling you and pushing you. And then you have a commitment once you receive it and are aware of it to follow it and actualize it. And that's where this whole part of to thine own higher self be true comes in, right? Being true to ourselves means not just receiving and understand it, but it means acting and manifesting and creating a world based on the truth that we receive through our intuition.
It's so interesting how you described, I love the two-step process piece, but how you described the intuition as a voice, right? That's coming through. You've also described it as light. I'm curious if you'd be willing to share with us, what are some different ways that intuition has shown up or been described to you by clients that you've worked with? Because I think something people really struggle with is they hear maybe this little voice in their head or they have this little twinge in their gut and they're like, well, is that my intuition? I'm not sure. So what is your experience of it and the people you work with as well, so people can kind of see at home if that lines up? Like, is it a voice? Is it a feeling? Is it, is it a female voice? Is it a male voice? Is it the voice of your mother? Like, what?
Honestly, Brett, that is the $1 million question right there, right? Because there's so many answers to that question. Because intuition, through these 4 types of intuition, it manifests an inconceivable number of ways. The trick really is to understand what intuition feels like for you. And when I work with people, I do a series of baseline exercises to teach people what their intuition feels like, right? Because intuition can be a male's voice. It can be a female's voice. It can be a feeling in your heart. It can be an inspiration. It can be a vision. You could see spirits. You could see energy. All of these are different ways that intuition works. Right? Or it can be something as simple as like, you want to make something and you have an idea for a design. So it's very grounded in one level, but it's also very ethereal on another level. And it's the full spectrum in between. So to answer your question, what we need to do to train people to understand their intuition is I go through a process where we work with some very simple intuitive tasks, right? We'll look at a picture or we'll visually interpret a picture and we'll get ideas of what this intuition feels like within us. And then we take it up to the next level and we do these exercises until we learn how our intuition feels. So then you put it out there and you think, okay, so is this have that feeling? Yes, I have that feeling of knowingness around this. That feels right. This feels like it's a thought, because it's really tricky differentiating between our thoughts and our intuitions a lot of the time, right? Until you get really good at it, until you practice a lot, you're not going to know the difference between a fear or a hope and your intuition, right? But the litmus test with that, the litmus test is coming from that place of stillness, right? So your intuition will always have your best interest in mind, first of all. It's never going to scare you. It's never going to freak you out. It will come from a place of quiet knowing and truth. Anytime you have something that's charged with emotion or something that's charged with even your own hopes or wants or desires, you can just pretty much scratch it off the list for intuition, because your mind and your heart, those two sides that intuition is above, we talked about, your mind and your heart have already gotten in the way. And when they get in the way, they create a level of emotional static that prevents us from receiving our true intuition.
I love what you're sharing, because it's almost easier if people are overwhelmed at home, instead of saying like, well, what's the voice that's intuition? It's almost like attacking the problem in reverse. It's like, let's do process of elimination and we can eliminate a lot of things that are not intuition. So I really want you to spell those out for us, because I think this is massively helpful. So you were saying anything that has a charged feeling behind it, like anger or like strong desire, anything with emotional charge, it's like off the list. That is not intuition. Are there other things like that you can share?
Yeah, so it's desires. If we want to say on one side, desires, forget it. If it's feeling, forget it. If it's fear, forget it. Those are the main things, right? Because anything that it's connected to our ego, really, anything that is connected to our own ego's feeling of safety or advancement or self-preservation.
Desires, feelings, fear. That's what I wrote down. This is a question I think that also comes up a lot. What about logic, right? Like, what if for that person who, they make a pro-con list, or their intuition's telling them something that's just totally illogical or goes against everything on the pro-con list? How does logic fit in here? Like, are they just supposed to toss logic out the window and listen to the little voice? Or what do you advise people to do?
Well, the golden mean is always a good strategy. But I mean, honestly, at the end of the day, if you have to pick one or the other, you got to just throw logic in the trash. I mean, we need our minds, right? There's no doubt that, we're a civilization based on our intellectual power. So I don't want to devalue that, where that's gotten us, right? So we have a strong foundation of the mind, and we need that. We have to accept that and honor that. However, we have to control it. And when we get to a point, if it's like, I'm going to make a list of 1,000 things, or I'm going to go with my gut, you got to toss the list of 1,000 things, because it's your gut that's going to be right. It's as long as you're free of fear, free of emotion, free of desire, and you're truly listening to your intuition and not your own personal motivation, right? So you have to make a commitment at that point of selflessness, right? Because your intuition is not going to tell you what you want to hear, right? It's going to tell you the truth, right? And sometimes we don't want to see that. So that's where it gets tricky. So if we can trust and we can follow and know that we're following our intuition, then our intuition will never let us down. And there's no need for a pro and con list, because we get the answer instantaneously. It's that inner genius that will give us an answer without having to figure out all of this and waste all this time with computations and strategies and whatnot.
I know, and I think that's one of the things that's so scary for people, because it's like we're supposed to trust this voice, this intuition voice, yet it's one of the hardest voices to sort of find and figure out. Although I think you have given us some good tips, this process of elimination. And before we close for today, are there any other sort of, like, if I wanted to take my intuition to the gym, like exercises I can do? I mean, I know you mentioned there's some things you do with clients, looking at cards and things like that. Can you go into a little more detail about what listeners could do at home if they just kind of want to sharpen the sword of their intuition on a day-to-day basis?
Really recommend journaling. If you're a creative person, writing or doing art, that opens the flow. Any kind of creative act gets your intuition flowing and puts you in a position to be more open to your intuition. Obviously, also physical energy flow. If you say take your intuition to the gym, literally do that. Working out, yoga, qigong, tai chi, all of the energy arts, very important to have the blockages cleared out of your physical system so that your intuition can flow. The card reading is great, getting a good intuition card. If you like tarot, using the metaphors on there. There's Osho Zen Tarot, is great. It's an online app that you can go to, and you just pick a card, and it has some really inspiring messages that you can work with. Little things like that help to keep them. Noticing synchronicities and serendipitous things that occur in your life are really important. And then finally, meditating, like making a ritual, a spiritual practice of meditation, and using the white light meditations as an activator for the intuition is a really important part of connecting all these things and enlivening that energy within you. So at the end of the day, it's really all about opening your flow. And the more you open your flow, and the more your intuition will connect with you. And then over time and practice, you'll get to figure out what your intuition feels like and what it doesn't.
I love that. And in line with the journaling and the noticing the synchronicities, I'd really encourage people to write down when your intuition happened to be right in retrospect, because that builds your confidence. And it's been really helpful for me when I'm like, oh, I kind of think that people would like, this kind of product or this kind of class if I put it together. It's so rare that we then stop and reflect after the fact and write down or say, oh, I was right about that. So that's just, another tip I want to throw out there. Guys, we are not going to let Kim go. We're talking to her next episode. We're going to go even deeper. We're going to talk about spiritual Darwinism. We're going to talk about this new convergence of spirituality and science. We're going to talk about the information age that we're in now and how we're going to move into the imagination age, all these cool concepts. So make sure to tune in to the next episode. If you're looking to enhance your intuition right now, another thing I'd encourage you to do is to go to savannahspirit.com, support the podcast, support the show. We are suggesting, based on this week's theme of intuition, that you explore Savannah Spirit's lapis lazuli crystal collection. It's known to improve your intuitive abilities. Lapis lazuli is a powerful gemstone worn by the ancient Egyptians for its various enhancing qualities. Savannah has a beautiful jewelry collection and crystals that you can put around your home or carry with you in your bag or on the go. Remember, use that code podcast30 for 30% off your first order. I hope you practice some of these intuition exercises that Kim and I have talked about, and tune into the next episode to go even deeper. From my heart to yours, namaste.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaeast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.